Open the cabinet under your bathroom sink tonight and look past the toothpaste, the old bandages, and the half-empty bottle of cough syrup. Somewhere in there, maybe pushed into a back corner, there is probably a small brown bottle most people only remember when someone scrapes a knee. Hydrogen peroxide. The same simple bottle that costs less than a fancy coffee. The same one many people buy once and then forget for years. But here's the part most gardeners never hear. That little bottle is not just for cuts and scratches. Used the right way, it can become one of the most useful tools in your garden, especially if you are tired of spending money on sprays, soil treatments, pest products, and expensive bottles that promise miracles but barely last one season. And no, this is not about dumping chemicals all over your vegetables. This is about understanding one very simple reaction, then using it carefully, cheaply, and intelligently. If you garden in Florida humidity, dry Arizona heat, cool Oregon rain, Midwest clay soil, or a small patio in New Jersey, the details may change a little. So before we go deeper, leave your state or USDA hardiness zone in the comments. It helps everyone compare what works in real American gardens, not just in perfect magazine photos. Stay with me, because later in this video, I am going to walk you through a full emergency root rescue. The kind of rescue that can save a plant most people would already be dragging to the trash can. To understand why hydrogen peroxide works, you only need one piece of science. Regular water is H2O. Hydrogen peroxide is H2O2. That means it is basically water with one extra oxygen atom attached to it. That extra oxygen atom is unstable, and instability is exactly where the power comes from. When hydrogen peroxide touches organic material like fungal spores, bacteria, soft pest larvae, or decaying root tissue, it releases that extra oxygen quickly. That reaction is called oxidation, and on a tiny scale it can damage the cell walls of many unwanted organisms. Then after that reaction happens, hydrogen peroxide breaks down into water and oxygen. That is the reason gardeners love it. When used properly, it does not leave behind the kind of heavy residue that makes you nervous about your soil, your herbs, or your tomato harvest. This one idea explains almost everything we are about to do. Hydrogen peroxide can clean, oxygenate, disinfect, and interrupt disease pressure. But it must touch the problem directly, and it must be diluted correctly. Now let us start with the garden killer that usually works underground before you even know there is a problem. Root rot. If you have ever had a plant look thirsty, even though the soil was wet, you may have seen root rot without realizing it. The lower leaves begin turning yellow. The whole plant starts to sag. You water again because it looks dry, but somehow the plant gets worse. That is the trap. Above the soil, the plant looks like it needs water. Below the soil, the roots may already be drowning. Root rot loves low oxygen soil. It shows up when a pot stays wet too long, when clay soil holds too much moisture, when drainage holes are blocked, or when a gardener waters with good intentions but a little too often. Once oxygen disappears from the root zone, harmful fungi and bacteria can take over. The roots soften, darken, and stop doing their job. The plant can no longer drink properly, even though it may be sitting in wet soil. This is where diluted hydrogen peroxide becomes useful. It does two things at the same time. First, it helps reduce the pressure from organisms that thrive in soggy, oxygen-poor conditions. Second, it brings oxygen back into the root area, almost like opening a window in a room that has been sealed for too long. For a general root health drench, mix 4 tablespoons of standard 3% pharmacy hydrogen peroxide into 1 liter of water. Use it only when the top of the soil is slightly dry, then pour it through the soil and let the pot drain well. Do not use it every day. Do not treat it like regular water. Think of it as an oxygen reset, not a daily drink. For plants that are simply tired, slow, or sitting in heavy soil, this gentle drench can make a noticeable difference. For a plant with serious rot, we will use a stronger rescue method later. Now let us move above the soil, because many gardeners lose plants not from one big disaster, but from small leaf problems that spread quietly. Powder and mildew on squash, black spot on roses, rust on leaves, blight on tomatoes. If you have gardened for more than a few seasons, you have probably seen at least one of these. The usual reaction is to drive to the garden center and buy whatever bottle has the strongest promise on the front label. The problem is that many sprays only suppress what you see for a few days, while spores hiding under leaves keep waiting for their chance to return. Hydrogen peroxide can help because it works as a contact spray. That means it kills or damages what it actually touches. It does not travel through the plant like a systemic product. It does not move through stems and leaves to hunt down infection from the inside. So your technique matters more than the label on the bottle. If you spray only the top surface of the leaves, you are doing half the job. Spores often hide underneath leaves, along stems, around joints, and in the crowded center of the plant where air movement is poor. For a mild preventive spray, mix half a cup of 3% hydrogen peroxide into 1 gallon of water. Put it in a good pump sprayer, not a weak little mist bottle, and coat the plant carefully. For an active outbreak, use 8 to 12 tablespoons of 3% hydrogen peroxide per gallon of water. Spray for 3 days in a row. Then stop for a day and rotate to another gentle preventive option, such as diluted neem oil, a baking soda spray, or sulfur if it is suitable for that plant. The rotation matters because one tool rarely solves every garden disease forever. Smart gardeners do not just spray harder. They change conditions. They improve airflow. They stop wetting leaves at night. They remove badly infected leaves. They rotate treatments before the disease gets comfortable. And always patch test first. Spray a few leaves, wait 48 hours, and see how the plant responds. Some plants, especially tender houseplants, orchids, and thin leaf varieties, can be sensitive. Next, let us talk about pests, starting with one of the most annoying indoor and patio problems, fungus gnats. Those tiny black flies hovering around your houseplants look harmless, but the adults are only the part you can see. The real damage happens in the top layer of damp soil, where the larvae feed on organic matter and tender young roots. For seedlings and small houseplants, that underground feeding can look like disease. Leaves yellow. Growth slows. The plant weakens. You hang sticky traps and catch adults, but the problem keeps coming back because the larvae are still in the soil. Hydrogen peroxide can break the cycle. Mix 1 part 3% hydrogen peroxide with 4 parts water. Let the top inch of soil dry first because fungus gnat larvae prefer moist soil and will move closer to the surface. Then drench the soil with the mixture until it runs through. You may see bubbling. That is the oxygen reaction happening in the soil. Repeat every 5 days for about 3 weeks, while also letting the soil dry more between regular waterings. The drench attacks the larvae, and the dry down makes the environment less inviting for the adults to lay more eggs. For soft-bodied pests like aphids and spider mites, hydrogen peroxide can also make the leaf surface less friendly, but do not expect one casual spray to erase a heavy infestation. Use the mild half-cup per gallon spray, coat the undersides, repeat carefully, and combine it with pruning, rinsing, airflow, and other pest controls when needed. Gardening is never about one magic bottle. It is about stacking small advantages until the plant has the upper hand again. Now take a step back and think about the bigger picture. Every spring, many gardeners spend a small fortune trying to solve the same problems they had last year. New sprays, new soil, new pest traps, new fertilizers, new promises. But sometimes the most powerful tools are not new at all. They are simple, cheap, and already sitting in the house. That is why understanding hydrogen peroxide matters. Not because it replaces every product in the garden shed, but because it gives you control. You can respond faster. You can clean tools. You can oxygenate soil. You can rescue roots. You can protect seedlings. You can do all of that without buying a different bottle for every single problem. If this kind of practical gardening knowledge helps you, subscribe to the channel. We are not here for pretty theories. We are here for tools that work in real yards, real pots, real raised beds, and real budgets. Now let us talk about something almost every gardener has noticed. After a powerful thunderstorm, plants often look different. Not after a light sprinkle, but after one of those heavy summer storms that shakes the windows, cools the air, and leaves everything shining. The garden looks greener. The leaves look fuller. The soil smells alive. Most people think it is only because the plants got water, but water is not the whole story. Rain from a storm can carry extra dissolved oxygen and tiny amounts of naturally formed oxidizing compounds. Lightning and atmospheric reactions change what falls from the sky. In a simple way, that storm helps the soil breathe. When you use a gentle hydrogen peroxide drench, you are copying a small piece of that effect. You are not replacing nature, but you are giving struggling roots a short burst of oxygen, especially in pots where soil can become compacted, stale, and airless. This can be especially useful for container plants. A plant in the ground has more space to recover. A plant in a pot lives in a closed system. If the soil becomes compacted, sour, and wet, the roots have nowhere to escape. That is why the 4 tablespoon per liter drench can be so helpful for tired potted plants, patio tomatoes, indoor tropicals, and raised beds with heavy soil. Now let us talk about seeds. Few things test a gardener's patience like planting seeds, watering carefully, waiting 2 weeks, and seeing nothing but bare soil. Then you dig around and find swollen seeds that never sprouted, or worse, seeds that rotted before they ever had a chance. Sometimes the problem is temperature. Sometimes it is planting depth. Sometimes the seeds are old. But sometimes the seed surface carries bacteria and fungal spores. Once you put those seeds into a warm, damp tray, the wrong organisms wake up before the seedling does. A short hydrogen peroxide soak can help. It cleans the outer seed coat and can soften harder shells so water enters faster. Mix 1 teaspoon of 3% hydrogen peroxide into 1 cup of water. Soak seeds for up to 30 minutes, then plant them immediately. This is especially useful for older seeds, hard-coated seeds, and seeds that have failed for you before. Do not soak tiny, fragile seeds for too long, and do not treat this like a replacement for proper seed starting conditions. You still need warmth, moisture, air, and the right planting depth. But as a simple pre-planting step, it can give seeds a cleaner start. Now we need to talk about the tools in your hand. Your pruners can save a plant, but they can also spread disease from one plant to the next. If you cut a diseased rose, then immediately cut a healthy tomato, you may be carrying spores, bacteria, or infected sap right along with you. The same goes for pots. A pot that held a plant with root rot last year may still have invisible trouble clinging to the inside surface. Rinsing it with a hose may remove dirt, but it does not always reset the pot. Hydrogen peroxide is excellent for cleaning because it bubbles into cracks and breaks down without leaving harsh residue. After cutting a diseased plant, wipe your pruning blades with straight 3% hydrogen peroxide. For old pots, use a 5050 mix of water and 3% hydrogen peroxide. Soak or scrub the inside. Let it bubble for about 10 minutes, then rinse. This is much gentler than bleach for many garden uses, especially around metal tools and planting containers. Bleach has its place, but it can be harsh, corrosive, and unpleasant to handle. Hydrogen peroxide also helps when you want to reuse old potting soil. Now be careful here. If a plant died from a serious disease, do not automatically reuse that soil for your most valuable plant. But if you have old container soil, mystery soil, or used seed starting mix that you want to refresh, a hydrogen peroxide drench can help reduce dormant fungus, pest eggs, and unwanted microbial load. Mix 1 cup of 3% hydrogen peroxide into 1 gallon of water and drench the old soil thoroughly. Let it sit for a day or two, then rebuild it with compost, fresh potting mix, worm castings, or whatever your planting plan requires. Think of this as a reset, not a complete soil replacement. Hydrogen peroxide can clean, but it does not magically restore nutrients, structure, or beneficial biology by itself. Now, for indoor growers using hydroponics or aquaponics, hydrogen peroxide can be powerful, but it demands respect. In hydroponic systems, warm nutrient water can become a perfect home for algae, slime, biofilm, and root disease. Oxygen levels matter enormously because roots are sitting directly in water instead of soil. A small dose of hydrogen peroxide can increase oxygen and help keep the system cleaner. A common low-level approach is 2 to 3 milliliters of 3% hydrogen peroxide per liter of fresh water every few days. But here is the warning. Hydrogen peroxide does not know the difference between good microbes and bad microbes. If you are using beneficial bacteria, mycorrhizae, compost teas, or microbial inoculants, hydrogen peroxide can damage those too. So do not mix this blindly with living biological products. Use it when you want a cleaner, more sterile system, not when you are trying to build a living microbial community. Now let us move to trees, because losing a tomato plant hurts, but losing a tree can feel like losing years of work. Storm damage, lawnmower cuts, cracked bark, broken branches, and pruning wounds all create open doors for disease. Once pathogens enter the cambium layer, the tree can face cankers, rot, blight, or slow decline. Spraying a fresh wound with 3% hydrogen peroxide can help reduce surface contamination. It will not cure a deep infection already inside the tree, and it will not replace proper pruning or professional care, but it can clean the surface and give the tree a better chance to seal itself. Spray lightly, let it dry, and keep watching. If you see spreading discoloration, mushrooms, soft bark, oozing, or a wound that worsens instead of healing, call an arborist. A tree is not the place to gamble if the damage looks serious. Now let us lock down the safety rules, because using the wrong strength can turn a helpful garden trick into a disaster. Use standard 3% hydrogen peroxide from the pharmacy. That is the brown bottle most Americans already recognize. Do not casually use 30% or 35% food-grade hydrogen peroxide in the garden. That strength is dangerously corrosive. It can burn skin, damage eyes, and scorch plants badly. If you are not experienced with chemical dilution, do not play with it. Stick to 3%. It is cheap, easy to find, and strong enough for the methods in this video. Here are the core recipes. For general root oxygen support, use 4 tablespoons of 3% hydrogen peroxide per liter of water. For mild leaf disease prevention, use half a cup per gallon of water. For active fungal pressure, use 8 to 12 tablespoons per gallon for 3 days, then rotate to another method. For fungus gnats, use 1 part 3% hydrogen peroxide with 4 parts water. For cleaning pots, use a 5-to-5 mix of water and 3% hydrogen peroxide. For old soil reset, use 1 cup per gallon of water. For emergency root rot rescue, use 1 part hydrogen peroxide with 2 to 3 parts water, but only during the rescue process, not as a routine habit. Always patch test leaves for 48 hours. Never spray in direct midday sun. Spray early in the morning or late in the afternoon. Make sure leaves are not already wet, because extra water changes your dilution. Cover the undersides, because that is where many pests and spores hide. Now here is the emergency root rescue I promised. If a plant is collapsing from suspected root rot, gently remove it from the pot. Shake away the wet soil. Look closely at the roots. Healthy roots are usually firm and white or light tan. Rotten roots are dark, mushy, slimy, or sour smelling. Sterilize your pruners with 3% hydrogen peroxide, then cut away every soft, dead, rotten root. Do not leave infected mush because you feel bad cutting. That tissue is no longer helping the plant. Next, soak the remaining healthy roots for 5 to 10 minutes in a solution of 1 part 3% hydrogen peroxide to 2 or 3 parts water. You may see bubbling as the reaction works on damaged tissue and clinging pathogens. Then gently pat the roots dry. Do not scrub them. Replant in fresh, well-draining soil. Use a clean pot with drainage holes. Do not reuse the old diseased soil for this plant. After replanting, water lightly with the gentle 4 tablespoon maintenance mix if needed, then let the plant rest. Do not fertilize immediately. A sick plant does not need a feast. It needs oxygen, clean roots, and time. From that point forward, water only when the pot feels lighter and the top soil has dried appropriately for that plant. Most root rot rescues fail because the gardener saves the roots, then goes right back to the same overwatering habit. Now, the question many vegetable gardeners ask is simple. Is this safe around food plants? When 3% hydrogen peroxide is properly diluted and used correctly, it breaks down into water and oxygen. That is why many gardeners are comfortable using it around tomatoes, peppers, herbs, cucumbers, and leafy plants. Still, use common sense. Do not spray a strong mix all over tender greens right before serving them. Rinse produce as you normally would. Follow safe handling, and when in doubt, use the mildest effective dilution. There is also one honest trade-off. Hydrogen peroxide can harm beneficial microbes along with harmful ones. It is not selective. At weak doses, the disruption is usually temporary, but strong drenches can reset part of the soil biology. That is why you should rebuild afterward with compost, healthy soil, worm castings, or compost tea after the peroxide reaction has finished and the plant is stable. Use hydrogen peroxide like a tool, not like a religion. A hammer is useful, but you do not use a hammer for every repair in the house. So here is your weekly garden checklist. Use a gentle oxygen drench on heavy pots that stay wet too long. Soak stubborn seeds for 30 minutes before planting. Clean pruners after cutting diseased plants. Disinfect old pots before spring planting. Keep a mild spray ready for high-risk plants like squash, roses, cucumbers, and tomatoes. Treat fungus gnats by drying the soil first, then drenching on a schedule. Rescue root rot quickly instead of hoping a drowning plant will magically recover. The real secret is not that hydrogen peroxide is expensive or rare. The secret is that it is simple, overlooked, and already within reach. A single brown bottle will not replace good sunlight, proper watering, healthy soil, airflow, and patience. But it can give you an advantage when disease, pests, stale soil, or root trouble show up. And for gardeners over 40 who have spent years trying product after product, there is something satisfying about finding a solution that does not require a new gadget, a subscription, or a shelf full of branded chemicals. So before you spend another $30 on another bottle that promises to save everything, check the cabinet. That little brown bottle may be one of the most useful garden tools you already own. Leave your state or USDA hardiness zone in the comments, especially if you are dealing with humidity, clay soil, fungus gnats, powdery mildew, or root rot. Your experience might help another gardener facing the same problem. If this changed the way you look at hydrogen peroxide, subscribe to the channel and share this with a friend who keeps losing plants every spring. Now go grab that forgotten brown bottle, label your mixtures carefully, use it with respect, and give your garden the clean oxygen boost it has been waiting for.